Brene Brown has the story about putting marbles in the drawer. We build that trust daily. It is not something that happens overnight. It is intentional in terms of having crew in the morning and morning meeting and having crew before you leave.
You're listening to the Bold by Choice podcast with Vashaunta Harris and Jim Goenner, where we ask what school could be and learn from the people brave enough to build it. Powered by the National Charter Schools Institute.
All right, and joining us in this episode is our friend and colleague, Don Cooper, who's going to help us set the frame for this episode. Welcome back to the show, Don.
Hey, Vashaunta, it's great to be here today.
Oh, thank you so much for your time. And I'm actually going to come to you with our first question today. And the reading argues that public education has a democratic purpose that goes beyond academic achievement. And so when you sit with that idea today, what to you feels most urgent or most misunderstood?
Yeah, great question, Vashaunta. And today's reading, it's a chapter in a book, and the chapter is called The Two Democratic Purposes of Public Education. And it's written by a scholar that many of us are familiar with. His name is Terry Moe. And Terry Moe is probably best known in the charter space, in the school choice space, for a book called Politics, Markets, and America's Schools, which was co-authored with John Chubb, and together that really shaped the way that a lot of people think about public school choice and what makes a public school public and the best ways to provide public education. He builds on some of those concepts within this chapter. And when we think about a school, we think about it being a democratic institution in a couple of ways. First, it exists for a democratic purpose, and it's preparing people for citizenship. So for a self-governing republic to continue to exist, we need smart people, we need virtuous people, we need people who are able to step up and self-govern. And by self-govern, we mean two things. One is take care of themselves and their families and their communities. So govern yourself. And the second thing we mean is participate in civic life. So make decisions at the state and national level. And in order to do that, we need public education to convey values and convey what's important and what it means to be an American today. The second thing that's democratic about public schools is they're public institutions, like a lot of public institutions. So like parks, like some public hospitals, like city government. And that has a special meaning because we expect certain things of our public institutions. We expect them to operate in certain ways. We have normative expectations for how they spend funds, for how they interact with members of the public, for their openness to ideas, for their openness to people coming in. So I think that's really what he's getting at with those two aspects of it. And it's just a tension within public education that I'm not sure that we've fully resolved over time, especially in the school choice space. Because so often in school choice, we think about public, and one of the innovations of chartering is that when we think about public, these are public schools in the sense that they are open to members of the public, open, they accept everyone who's coming in. They don't discriminate in admissions. They receive public funds. They operate within public normative boundaries on things, but they might not be run by public employees. You're working with other organizations, nonprofit organizations that have charters to allow them to operate as public schools. So there's a little bit of a tension, a little bit of a shift there. And I think that's what Terry's talking about within this article.
Yeah, I agree. And we're talking about like these two different ideas or these tensions. And one of them is the author is distinguishing between schools as democratic institutions and the schools that kind of simply deliver education to that public, as you were just talking about.
Yeah.
So, Jim, I'd like to bring you in on this question. Where do you see that distinction playing out most clearly or breaking down in today's education system?
There is so much talk right now about schools as a delivery system, schools as a place where kids go to get skills and abilities to get jobs, schools that are designed to raise math and test scores and close achievement gaps. What we're talking about here is public education as civic infrastructure. And that's a huge distinction and mind shift. And yet that's where public education started. It's why it's embedded in each state's constitution. And when you go look at the clauses in the state constitutions, it really is about this notion that education is civic infrastructure. Well, what do you mean by that? It means that education is core to helping civil society function. And the reason is we need educated citizens. And our way to do that is to have schools that we fund publicly make sure that they're prepared to take on the duties and responsibilities of citizenship. It's why when I do a lot of public speaking, I show that flag in We the People and say the real experiment isn't charter schools. The real experiment is America. And can a free people self-govern and take responsibility?
Absolutely. And you're calling out another one of those tensions. And Don, I'll come to you for this next question. Democratic purpose often creates these tensions that we're talking about, sometimes between efficiency and participation, sometimes between coherence and diversity, and other times between consistency and choice. Which of those tensions do you think schools most often underestimate?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. There really is a lot there within those tensions. And one of the things about public institutions in general and schools specifically is you have so many different constituencies you serve. And with schools, you have different families that you're serving, different elements of the community, different stakeholders, and everybody has a slightly different set of values as to what they want to see come out of the schools. So democratic institutions like schools have a big job, and that's balancing the values that their stakeholders have to try to arrive at something that we would call the common good that's going to be good for everybody, even though everybody might not always agree to it at first. It's advancing civil society and advancing the purposes for which our communities and our nation was founded on things. Because of this balance, because of the tensions between the multiple issues, my goodness, it really is easy for schools to just revert back to doing what they've always done. It's easy when schools can rely on what a legislature says or rely on a so-called best practice is the one best way of doing things. And the reason it's easy is because it avoids the conflict that sometimes comes with trying to negotiate out multiple competing values of different groups who have different visions on things. So if anything, going back to, kind of reverting back to the mean, reverting back to the way things always done, that's where I think a lot of schools fall short on this. And I'd encourage anyone who's listening who runs a school or sits on a school board and has to be in a position to make those decisions, to take on that challenge and to have those tough conversations and seek for the common good in what you're trying to accomplish at your school.
Vashaunta, when education fails, the cost doesn't show up immediately, but it always comes due.
Tell us more about that. That just felt like rich and heavy and landed. Tell us a little bit more about what you're thinking there.
We see where education is failing a lot, but the immediate consequence doesn't often show up until years down the road. And we're all talking right now about the times and the humanity and the lack of civility. And yet that is the purpose of public education, to ensure we have prepared citizens, to ensure civic society, to ensure that people can be different but united by a common purpose. And the breakdown of education over time has a cost. We're feeling it.
Yeah, Vashaunta, I'm just going to expound on that a little bit and a little more specifically than Jim, because he's right in this, in that when we see challenges in public education, we don't always see the effects of those challenges until later on. I think what we're seeing right now is, issues with how we've taught civics, social studies, and government in America's public schools dating back 25 years or so. And civics, social studies, government, these are all things that are essential for people to learn, because when a child goes to school, that child might go off and be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher. They have lots of career options. They might go into the trades. Who knows it? But the one thing that every one of them is going to be is a citizen. And they are all going to be asked to participate in their communities, in their states, and their nations in certain ways through voting, through civic dialogue on stuff. So a very long time ago, we made a couple of decisions on things. We decided that the core of education is English language arts and math. And that kind of meant that those subjects that advance civic education, that advance people's ability to participate democratically, weren't seen as that important anymore. The second thing is, because the social studies and civics and government involve competing values on things, both the Democrats and the Republicans were really concerned about who set the curricula for it. And the result was nobody set the curricula for it. So we've had a lot of weak civics and social studies and government education for a long time in America. And I think we're starting to see that reflected in how people interact with their government, their trust in government, voter participation rates, service, just a basic understanding of the three branches. So I think when Jim says that the cost shows up later in life, that's the kind of things that he's talking about.
Totally understood.
Vashaunta, to be really blunt, with no education system, there's no democracy. And to take it deeper, when we reduce education to test scores or job pipelines, we shrink its purpose.
That's so rich. And I'm glad you both have pulled out these tensions and also a little bit of that history. Because what I want listeners to hear as we go to our next school are examples of schools who are tackling this issue head on, schools that are deeply engaged in how their students truly become, exactly as you just said, really responsible and thoughtful citizens. So we've spent a little bit of time talking about the theory, but we are going to bring in one of the people because we all know that democratic purpose is not abstract. It actually lives and breathes inside of schools, inside of classrooms, in the projects that students and teachers are doing, and most of all, in those relationships. So today, we are super honored to welcome my fellow South Carolinian cousin, Belicia Reaves, who serves as the executive director of Two Rivers Public Charter School in Washington, D.C. So yes, friends, she's originally from South Carolina. You guys know I'm biased. That's my home state. Also a math educator by training. And what I really love is Belicia is a lifelong believer that this work is truly a calling. And she's leading a school community that is truly built around inquiry and diversity and shared responsibility. So without further ado, Belicia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, well, we are the ones who are excited. I cannot wait for our podcast listeners to hear the story we're going to talk about today. But before I get ahead of myself, which I typically do when I've already had 2 cups of coffee, I want to slow down and allow our friends to get a chance to get to know you. So who you are just as a human, how you take up space, and who you are as a leader. So I'll give you a little bit of time to share.
Well, listen, it is a blessing to be here at Bold by Choice. I am Belicia Reaves, as you said, from South Carolina, small town called Cross, amongst Goenner and Goose Creek, that local, I should say, suburbs to Charleston. So
That's right.
Charleston. I grew up with a family of educators. My mom was retired as a 35-year elementary school teacher, and my father ran a daycare center for over 25 years. My middle sister was a middle school teacher, and I taught high school. And our youngest sister was the one who was like, yeah, no, y'all can all have that. Thank you very much. I'm going into finance. But my parents truly believed that education was the way for us to see the world. My dad used to say all the time that education is the key. The world is bigger than Cross. If you want to see it, then you got to get all that you know. And my mom's reply used to be like, you know what you know, nobody can take away from you, right? So for me, I really have always been a lover of learning. And math is something that came naturally, which surprised both of them because neither one of them were necessarily math people. But I tell them everybody's a math person, just in your own way. What I really, when I think about growing up in South Carolina and how much that piece influenced me, it's like I used to say to folks that teaching is really in my DNA, and I just didn't see it. I ran from it for a really long time. My work in mathematics in corporate America and Sandia National Labs before going into teaching was really phenomenal. But I found myself always tutoring other people's children. And everybody's like, well, have you ever thought about teaching? It's like, good for you. My dad used to say, and you could also teach other teachers because you just do this without even realizing that's what you're doing.
Yes, it's very natural.
Exactly. And so what I think about when I say that this work is a calling, at one point in New Mexico, I just decided to answer. And back to grad school I went.
I love it. You aren't running from it anymore.
No, I'm not running from it anymore. I think one of the things that really shaped it and really made it solidified for me was my opportunity, like currently, and all of the schools that I've taught in, is how I learned. I went to Cross High School where people who look like me told me that me being in math and science was okay because I had other examples of Black women in those fields. And then I went to the South Carolina Governor's School for Science and Mathematics, where everything was applied. I taught and learned with my hands. And then I got to go teach literally in the same venue. And now I'm at Two Rivers, who believe that kids learn best by doing.
Yeah. Hey, Belicia, Two Rivers was founded almost 20 years ago by parents and educators who wanted something very specific for Capitol Hill, a school that was diverse and community-rooted, committed to developing both academic skills and character. When you think about this founding vision, what democratic needs do you think the school was trying to meet?
So one of the things that I thought about was the context, right? Like the school was developed in, and as an EL school, we were in a time period where No Child Left Behind was really the big thing in 2002 or 2004. And
we all remember those days.
We all remember those days of high stakes testing. And so the Democratic piece that those families wanted to make sure that kids knew that learning was fun. And that in our mission statement, right, when you think about who we are, we wanted our kids to make sure that they were going to become lifelong active participants in their own education, that they had a sense of self, community, and really were going to become active citizens in their own, responsible and compassionate members of society. And so when we think about how you make kids responsible, our core values, or the core values of Two Rivers, really think about being thoughtful, experiencing and growing, giving access to kids who didn't necessarily have all the things that a traditional school was giving DC students at that time. They wanted a different opportunity for them.
Yeah, what a wonderful way for Two Rivers to step up and really fit that need and meet a democratic purpose within Capitol Hill.
I used to call Two Rivers our little cousin. I worked at a high school in DC before transitioning as ED, and Two Rivers came to visit us to see the model and see that learning in action and how you do co-teaching and what it means to have, the right people in the classroom to get students who wanted to get out of the classroom to enhance their learning.
Cool. That's awesome.
So one of the stories that you were telling us the other day, as we just were sitting down and getting to know more about you and your school, really, really stuck with me. And I want to call that story in this moment. And so you're sharing with us about, I think it was preschoolers, maybe kindergartners, and they're getting ready for their problem of practice. And you all have a garden there in the school. And so they're touring the school, they're in the garden, and they're grappling with this concept that there weren't seats in the garden. Can you walk us through this project with those preschoolers so our listeners could hear it? It's so awesome.
Oh my goodness. I cannot even begin to tell you how much I love this project. So each year there are expeditions that our preschoolers go through, and the students were in the garden that the lower kids, preschool, these are 4-year-olds in the class, but the 3-year-olds and the upper school kids both contribute. And they were standing around really looking at the flowers that were growing, the food that was growing. And somebody was like, oh, and they just sat on the ground, crisscross applesauce. And they come back to their classroom and they're having a conversation about what they were seeing. And someone said, it's really tough to stand out there. We were out there for a long time and there was no place to sit. Like, we just sat on the ground. And she was like, oh, that's a problem. So you have these 4-year-olds, the teachers that I love so dearly. Well, how could we solve that problem? Could we solve that problem as pre-K schoolers? And their answer was yes. And she goes, well, how could we solve that problem? I mean, well, we need chairs. We need someplace to sit. What does that look like? So in expeditionary learning, the kids have this project where they are thinking about how can we help our community. Even as 4-year-olds, the students have this ownership where they know that they're members of community. It's how they start their units off in pre-K 3, talking about their families and their home and their families at school. Pre-K 4, and we're talking about all the ways that we can help our community. Those students drew their plan to decide what kind of chair, what kind of bench was going to be the best for the community, who could hold or how many people could sit on the chair. Because some people were like, well, I want a chair, I sit by myself. And others were like, we want to be with our friends. And so as a class, collectively, both pre-K students decided that we were going to build a bench. And this bench needed to hold more than one person. And in actuality, when it was finished, the bench holds 6 4-year-olds.
Wow.
So that we could have our friends come in. They had experts come in, from carpenters to architects. You got to draw the plan, then you got to build the plan, which nails, it's out of what kind of wood. All of those were part of the process. They went to the building museum in DC. So there's always a connection to what they're doing outside of the classroom to inside the classroom. We actually call them field studies, not field work, because it's all connected to what they are studying in class. And together, they all built a bench that they then got to show their entire process, even their little models, to their families at what we call our celebration of learning, where students then actively present to the community, the experts that they got to see in the field or in their classroom. They came and they can see them all singing songs about building their bench, as well as the process that they went through, because the journey is what's really important, not just the final product at our school.
And I love that. One of the things, as we were talking about, the connection between our reading this week and your school is really just highlighted in your mission statement, which says the mission of Two Rivers Public Charter School is to nurture a diverse group of students to become lifelong, active participants in their own education, develop a sense of self and community, and become responsible, compassionate members of society. And when you told that story about this one example, because there are many examples of the project-based learning approach and how students are learning and grappling with what community means for them and how they participate in it, this example was just like spot on. I was like, what better way to blend all of those elements of your mission statement in a real live experience that the teachers and students are taking on. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, but Vashaunta, you've also described Miss Brenda's day of service and how students just don't donate, but they engage. What does it look like when middle school students choose an issue, design a response, and interact directly with people beyond their walls?
So one of the days that we as a school have designated as a day of service, but also a time when we get to honor Miss Brenda, who was one of the most active volunteers at Two Rivers from the time her kids went to the school, way beyond. And when she passed, we decided we wanted to honor her by naming our day of service after her. It's more than just a day of service, though, at Two Rivers, because service learning is something that we want our kids to take internally and also understand that giving back to their community isn't just about charity per se, but is when you actively engage with community members that people then remember that. The middle school students have a student council, almost like their own mini government, and our student ambassadors in the student council got a chance to have a conversation with the special project manager and our deans about what they wanted to do to help us decide as the adults what this day of service was going to look like. And they really had an opportunity to go through all the things that they had done as they were growing up, because we believe in one continuous journey from pre-K through 8th grade. And those students said, well, we've donated trail mix a lot, or we've given back. But this time, or the last couple of years, they've wanted to really be more engaged and active. And so the students decided that we want to serve teens. We want to serve kids our own age, or how can we help folks who look like us and that we can communicate and talk to? And so they decided, like, hey, there are other nonprofits and places where teens are, particularly like when they're walking around the city, helping the unhoused or helping kids who may not necessarily go to a school that has all of the arts or all of the things that Two Rivers has. And so they decided that we wanted to give back to nonprofit communities or aftercare services in the city that they live in, around their neighborhoods, helping students who are their own age. And so that looks like they created a food pantry where folks both inside our community and outside, because they were like, hey, we can't make assumptions about what's happening for folks in here because everybody doesn't know everybody's whole story. And teen shelters, they really wanted to make sure that our physical bodies, as well as like our social and emotional learning, is just as important as our academic learning. And so moving the needle up, I would say, beyond just making trail mix, allowed them to really decide, I'm going to go to Martha's Table, we're going to go to Sasha Bruce, give the students toiletries, things that they need, but also then have conversations with them about what's happening in their lives so that we can, in many ways, make new friends. You just never know where the conversations can go.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's a great way to help students become better friends and neighbors, and also a great way to help people become great citizens too. So maybe share a little bit about how that connects, Ms. Brenda's Day of Service connects with your views on citizenship and what you're trying to teach and shape the next generation of citizens to be.
When we at Two Rivers talk about being responsible and compassionate members of society, one of the big pieces that we love when I think about the 3 dimensions of student achievement, we want kids to master knowledge and skills, but we also believe that a kid's character is one of the most important components of who they are which is why we're intentional about being responsible and compassionate members of society. You can have students who know all the math and English in the world, but if I'm not a good person who is caring about more than just the circle of me, how am I contributing to my community? And so for us, it is definitely the citizens that we want to see in the world are always thinking about the greater good. And we use that language in our scholarly habits, like when they say, I act with compassion and embrace diversity. We hold our students accountable both academically and on their report cards. You see their scholarly habits reports. Like they actually are demonstrating to their parents and to any other high school that they're preparing to go to, like, this is who I am as a whole child, not just my numbers.
Yeah, that's really beautiful and inspiring for other schools. Thank you.
There's another connection that I made with our reading for this week in your school. So in the reading, it talks about democracy, but not just as like content, but really the structure of democracy. And then I was thinking about when we were talking some of the structures that you've put in place with the entire community at Two Rivers, and especially the adults, right? And so there have to be these structures that help adults. It sounds like your teachers operate as facilitators of learning with their students. And there was a phrase you used, you said something very powerful, and that was, we are a crew, not passengers. And so that really kind of stuck with me as I think about like how you all embody some of these elements of democracy in your structure. So all that is like the setup, right? So the question is, how do you all intentionally design adult culture at Two Rivers? So what are some of the leadership moves and the professional development structures that you all put in place to model the type of democratic community that you want your students to experience?
Yeah. So one of the mottos that I live by, and I chuckle now because people was like, "Oh, this is Belicia's quote." We schedule what we value. If it is
Yeah.
your time is your most precious asset, you can't get it back. And so when we look at the schedules that our students and our teachers have structurally, we want to make sure that our teachers know that they are seen, that they are valued, and the work that they do are important. So we got to listen to them. They need to be heard. And the structures start with from the day that you decide and say yes, really, as a member of to become a member of our community, we talk about welcome to the boat. You are now on our crew. And so everybody has a purpose and a seat on the boat. And we want to make sure it's the right seat for you and that you're always going in the right direction. And that starts with our new crew orientation. If you look at our scheduling, our teachers actually new staff come back 3 weeks before school start. And I know for some people that's a long time, but in actuality,
Like, you're cutting my summer break.
but in actuality, for us, sometimes it's not enough time, but we want to make sure that new crew gets time to bond with each other for those first 5 days. And not only do they come together in August for those 5 days, but as the school year goes out, they meet bi-weekly in the first semester and then monthly in the second semester as a new crew that is really either previewing what's coming up ahead, or they get a chance to just talk with each other and learn different like TR 101 skills to make sure that they are understanding why we do what we do and not just like, well, what's this traditional? Why is it that this is how we move? Every Wednesday in our schedule is a half a day. So that Wednesday afternoon is professional development based on teacher feedback from the previous year that our instructional coaches, content directors, our CAO then organize to flow in a manner that makes the most sense given the content that teachers are teaching along the way. And so that people aren't overwhelmed trying to get everything crammed into August for their own learning. Each teacher's schedule has planning with their team, i.e. all of the people who teach all of the same kids. You also get the vertical alignment because there are 2 elementary schools where all of the third grade can come together. We also loop. So our kindergarten to first grade teachers have the same kids for 2 years, second and third. And so those teachers then have time together to truly look at what is that planning. There's nobody that's having to come in really early in the morning or stay late at night because the planning time is in the school day.
And I wanted to connect too. I was thinking about the example of the preschoolers, and there was a story about middle school projects, right? And how they ground themselves in community, but are also giving back. And I thought about, well, how do the teachers experience those moments? How do you all prepare the teachers to be able to provide those types of community-based and project-based experience for students? Can you share a little bit about that part as well?
Most definitely. So the same scholarly habits that we talk about that our students have, we have adult crew habits too. So we want our teachers to make sure that they feel empowered, not just with the content that they come from their college, their degrees, and I have a specialty in this, or if I'm a generalist as an elementary school teacher, I know the foundations that our students need to learn in order to move on. We really believe that there's a continuum of learning. When we say lifelong, that really means we ourselves as the adults are also still learning. So when you think about our core values, those scholarly habits, and now the adult crew habits, it is definitely understanding that we serve first when we think that's an adult crew habit. Leadership is not about me, it's about others. And so our teachers get time in those professional development sessions to understand project-wise how we build things together. Everything we do in our PLs, professional learning, we do crew as well. They do crew and morning meeting with their kids. We as the adults do crew. You get your greeting, your reading. They have initiatives. It is intentionally teaching them games and activities that they can then go do with their students. And so even though it's adult learning, it's also learning that they can then go apply in their own classroom. And so then when the teachers say, hey, I want to necessarily, let's say, focus on active managing in an active classroom, because sometimes it's not even content. It's really about how do I develop the relationships, nurture the relationships with crew, with my students, with my families. We talk about sunshine calls because every time you call a parent, you don't want to be giving them bad news.
Oh my gosh, I know. And then people wonder why parents don't want a school call. It's always bad. You got to do a good call.
Exactly. You want to be able to celebrate what kids are doing. And so those sunshine calls, they go a long way. Parents are active members of our community in the sense that when they sign up at TR, they are coming and they know that I have 4 conferences that I have to go to for my kid, one in August to get to know you and one every quarter, because I am invested in letting my students know that I care about them. And I'm not just showing up for sports. I'm coming to see how you're doing academically and how can I help you on those field studies or field work that we are going on, enhance the learning that you're going to remember for life. And so that, I think, is one of the ways that we definitely want to make sure that our teachers know this work is about them, our students, and they are what matter the most. And the structures are that they need to be successful. Like, we're going to give them what they need.
You know, I am so glad that we started this episode with a reading from Terry Moe. And I just think he's one of the greatest scholars out there currently on school choice and democracy and the democratic purpose of public education. And part of that is really giving families meaningful choice. And Two Rivers exists because of that parent choice. And it's so encouraging to hear, so many parents are choosing it and they know what they're making a choice for too. So with that, there's kind of a balance. So how do you balance parents' choice, a family's choice of going to Two Rivers with the shared norms and values across the diverse community that you serve?
One of the things that I think about when we talk about balancing or honoring family choice is that over 50% of the students in DC are served by charter schools. Each one has their own theme, has their own beliefs around what they know or believe is important for students to learn. And I already spoke to you about how for Two Rivers, the mastery of knowledge and skills, character, and high quality work are what we want students to know. Their character in terms of who we want them to become. And when I think about balancing that choice, one of the things that feels sometimes really hard is standing our ground on the things that we value. And reminding parents that you chose us knowing that this is who we are and what we do. One of the incidences that always comes to mind for me that is, different from other places is that standards-based grading is how Two Rivers grades. Students don't get an A, B, C, or D because we feel that does not then take them back to what they're learning, what they're studying, or who I am when I'm talking about restructuring my personal character. I want you to be able to tell me what I did wrong. I want to be able to repair it with whoever I harmed and know that I can then be redeemed and we can become friends again, or I can go back knowing that I've learned a lesson and I'm not going to do what I just did to hurt this person's feelings. We really make sure that we have firm conversations with families, letting them know that, hey, if you have chosen us, you are saying to us that the standards that students have on not just their report cards, but also any lesson or project that they are working on is what we want them to be able to articulate. And for some parents, in some particular meetings, it's just, I just want to know how they're doing. I just want to know, are they passing? Are they not? And it's like, well, we want them to be able to tell you. So we have student-led conferences, and they are demonstrating using their work, showing their parents how they have progressed. For a kid who's in fifth grade to be able to say, these are my strengths, these are my areas of growth. Here's what I've been working on, Mom, and the goals that I have to get better in fifth grade. Listen, where are you going to be in eighth grade? By the time a student graduates from Two Rivers Middle School, we require them to give the other piece where I feel like we stand our ground. We require them to have to give what we call a passage portfolio presentation of their learning from sixth grade to eighth grade. There are people who say, well, they already got their grades. They've passed their classes. Why do they need to give this presentation? They're stressing the children out. And we say, because reflection on who you are and what you have done and knowing your strengths and weaknesses is only going to best prepare them for high school. I was like, they get to write not just show the work, but they get to write about how I have grown and who I am becoming as a eighth grader, or why I'm ready for high school. They are self-assured and confident enough to know that and articulate that, give a 25-minute presentation to not just their teachers and families, but also guests, visitors, get the critique after a 10-minute Q&A.
It's wonderful. That is wonderful, and such a sense of community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and before we head to the wrap, one of the things that was so stand out about thinking about the Two Rivers story and your structure is the intentionality that you all have across each of the grade levels and helping the students understand themselves, defining, I think, first like their own family and then like the school community, and then how that continues to scaffold up as they get older in the middle school grades and the upper grades, of like how community begins to expand beyond one's own neighborhood, right, to the city, to the state, which it's DC, but the surrounding area, the DMV. And that was just like so powerful to hear how intentional you are at Two Rivers in assisting students in that process of understanding.
I think one of the biggest things we can say we have done well is when we look at the alumni who get a chance to come back and really interact with our current eighth graders or current middle schoolers, because they want to come back to see their teachers, and they are telling them, oh man, like how ready they were for high school. You may not appreciate it now, but oh, Miss Carolina's pushes to you about really making sure you get your writing, how many drafts that you do, it's all going to be worth it. Those rough drafts is what leads to them knowing how to communicate with each other, knowing how, well, this is a good paper and I can be proud of that, like, and be able to stand up firm and tall and just own their work in ways that it just makes you proud. And so I know it works. I've seen it on a high school level, college level. I don't know how many alumni I have out in the world, but there's nothing that brings me joy than seeing them in the city. Some married now, some working, having their own families and kids, and having some of those TR families now come back.
Come full circle.
Come full circle, and their little babies are coming to see us, which is just amazing.
I love that. I love it. Well, Dawn, since we've been kind of having this conversation through the lens of the reading, I'm excited to bring you in as kind of like my intellectual partner here. As you hear Belicia describing, preschoolers solving school community problems and middle schoolers saying, hey, we want to impact the lives of other citizens that are our age, that look like us and think like us. What does this confirm about the democratic purpose of public education?
Yeah, great question. And just what a great story that Two Rivers has. And Belicia, you and your leadership team are doing just wonderful things for kids. And, kind of going back to thinking about public education, not every student who who leaves Two Rivers or other schools is going to be a doctor or a scientist or a lawyer or lots of other great professions out there. But everybody is going to be a neighbor, everybody is going to be a citizen. And sometimes we lose track of the democratic purpose of public education, and that's to prepare the next generation for citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that means helping them be skilled so they can get great jobs. Part of it means preparing them to live within civil society. And that means how do they take care of themselves and their families, but also equally important, their communities, and how do they contribute to their state and nation over time, too. Oftentimes, we think of civic engagement just as preparing people to vote once every
Mm-hmm.
2 years or once every 4 years. And if that's all civic engagement meant, we're going to have a pretty poor democracy over time
Yeah.
because we're going to be abdicating our responsibilities in our ability to shape our communities and state and nation in a way that we think makes them better over time and more inclusive for more people. So it's just really encouraging to hear that Two Rivers is helping students become better citizens over time and preparing them early for their role and responsibilities within civil society. It's also really encouraging to hear that you're starting to instill those shared norms and values at an early age too. And something that I just love about choice and I love about America is we're a great big country, and not everybody necessarily shares the same values on things. So we all approach our civic engagement, we all approach our place in community a little different. So to be able to have a school like Two Rivers that parents can choose that aligns with their values, aligns with their concept of citizenship, and prepares their children for the responsibilities of the future is just a beautiful thing and something truly beautiful about the charter movement that we can have schools that do that.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And Belicia, hearing that reflection, what feels most true to you about how your school lives out the democratic purpose of public education?
What feels most true to me is in all the feedback surveys and experiences that I have had, our families have said, our students have said, our teachers and staff, everybody says we are a community. And Two Rivers as crew, we take care of our community. We cry together when people are sad. We hug, we share in their pains, sorrows, and joys. And one of the things that I don't think you can get in a better place is that opportunity to have a learning community, but also one who cares about the people as whole selves. And every child from 3 years old all the way up to 13 wants to know that they are seen and that somebody is looking out for me. The crew is intentional, the community building with one another day after day. Brene Brown has the story about putting marbles in the drawer. We build that trust daily. It is not something that happens overnight. It is intentional in terms of having crew in the morning and morning meeting and having crew before you leave. We want to see you. We want you to know you are loved. We want you to know that as whole people, I was like, we want you to feel like you can come here on a day-to-day basis and be more than just safe, but you're going to have fun. You're going to learn so much. And then you're going to go out into your own communities and the city and help people become their best selves. If we can continue in our service to the greater good, I just know there's no stopping where they're going to go and what people are going to do. And I know the impact is going to be great.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I don't know why this came into my head, but my mom and grandma were sharing. They were out having like a little girls' day the other day, taking grandma to run her errands. And so a part of that, they go to lunch to a very popular spot here in our town. And grandma says, they go to pay and she gives the lady some extra money to pay for. She's like, just pay it forward to whoever's behind me. Like not even thinking or whatever. So they sat down and eat. And my mom said she realized that the person, I guess the person at the counter told that next customer what had happened, and they were so grateful. And then they paid for the next person behind them. And so mom said, I sat there and ate, and I watched this trickle effect in the restaurant of people just like paying it forward for the next person. And so what it sounded like to me is like what you all are doing at Two Rivers is creating the conditions for this domino effect to take place. And so it starts with your preschoolers, and you're teaching them about self and serving in their own school. And then they begin to service those projects, right? Creating benches for friends to sit. Well, then now friends are sitting and they're going to tackle the next issue in the 3 to 5 grade level, right? And so it's this beautiful domino effect of humans helping humans, people taking responsibility for the spaces they get to share in and take a part of, and making sure that they're passing those ideas and responsibilities and traditions along. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us and our podcast listeners the kind of beautiful way that you all are exemplifying the democratic purpose of public education.
It's just been wonderful because what you shared with us today really serves as a reminder that the charter idea just isn't about structure. It's about schools that help young people become active participants in their own lives and their communities.
Yeah.
So when civic purpose is part of by design, like is at Two Rivers, and not accidental, schools become more than just schools. They really become part of our civic infrastructure, and they help us further practice a democracy. So thank you for the work that you're doing and for sharing your story with us.
And thank you all for this opportunity. Go Sharks.
Go Sharks. Well, listeners, we're so glad that you've been hanging out with us. We'll be at the same bad station at the same bad time next week. Thanks for listening. You all keep building, keep thinking, and stay bold by choice. I'll see you next week.